I mentioned that ANZ is one of our partners, and two other partners of this event are Cisco and Telstra. Cisco looked at the cost that many businesses face when they try and organise meetings and thought a lot of that cost comes, and you'd know better than me as business people, from transporting people around the world to come face-to-face. With their technology, they can do that in a cheaper way in terms of flights and accommodation and the whole bit. And this screen is about to come alive as we welcome our third and final speaker for this afternoon, Professor Stephen Heppell, who joins us live from England. The TV was turned off. Now it's being turned on. And Stephen, I went to his website, heppell.net, just last night, and I very much encourage you to do that. A global leader in learning space design. Welcome, Stephen. Michael speaking.
Hi there. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon.
What time is it where you live?
Oh, it's some ungodly hour. Breakfast, I think.
Well, we won't hold you long. Before I leave you to speak solo, can I ask you, what is the next word in this sequence, Stephen? There's no right answer or wrong answer. Yellow, toadstool, dragon, what?
Sausage, I think.
I can see the link there. Can I ask you to put your hands together and welcome a gentleman who's going to be talking to Playful Learning, Why We All Need Cheering Up. Please welcome Stephen Heppell.
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me about the revolving door. I'm terrified of them. I always go through the side entrance, and I recommend you all do the same. Listen, I was just looking at my Facebook while we were setting up here, and there's a picture there that a pal's posted of his son. It's his first day at school. We're in the beginning of the school year here, with sort of 6 months different to you, and he put his son to bed, and he went in to tuck him in, and the little boy was lying there in bed, fully dressed in his school uniform, with his backpack on his back, asleep in bed, and which is quite delightful. And I was thinking back to the that poem that you were introducing all of us with, and the first line, I think, was what wounded you in your infancy. And I was thinking, golly gosh, what takes us from the joy of learning that little mite who literally could not wait to get to the freshness of school, sitting there asleep in his uniform with his backpack on. What takes us on that to the dismay of so many 15-year-olds? And for me, it's been play, it's been joyfulness that's joined that gap up. And God, I was talking to a group of head teachers in China, and they have a big problem in China with disaffection, the same as you do, we do, everybody does. And I mapped out the next 15 years. I thought of significant change in their policy to the head teachers, and I said, if all this goes well, what do you think things might be like in 15 years' time? And one head teacher said to me after a pause, she said, there may just be a little more joy. And I think that's absolutely spot on, and it's putting joy into learning is really a big part of what we're doing in our lives, I think, in this third millennium. I hesitate to say 21st century because, we're well into the 21st century. I keep going to places where people talk about what we do to get 21st century business, 21st century learning. If you're a 9-year-old kid, you've never lived anywhere but in the 21st century. We're a tenth of the way through it. Already. It's well on the way to being the next century. But let's talk a little about maybe the third millennium. I'm building a school down in Portland on the south coast of England. It's a most unusual school. It's a 0 to 21 school. We've got children. What does it say on the brochure? You crawl in as a baby and you stagger out as a graduate. It's 0 to 21 plus. So you go right through school. You start literally the minute you're conceived. You get put into a home base, and you know where you're going to be. So you're born into the school, and you don't leave until you graduate with a university degree. It's a really unusual place. Now, that might be a bit unremitting, think, crikey, no time off for good behaviour. But we've got some really interesting partners in it, one of which is IDOS, the world's biggest computer gamers company. And they're partnering me in this extraordinary school. But their entire role is simply to make sure that we don't lose sight of playfulness on the way through learning, because play is such an important part of making learning seductive and engaging, and crucially, about making learning effective. it was interesting listening to the piece from your Australia in the Year on mental health. I've been involved with building another little school over here. It was much smaller. We have children over here with hemiplegia. It's a bit like being born with a slight stroke. Part of your brain, left hand or right hand side, doesn't quite work. And hemi kids are, they're not handicapped in a way that would cause them to be state-mentored and get extra support. But it sure as heck hurts them in the learning process. When a group of children run down a corridor, it's the hemi kid's always the last one to arrive with a slight limp. When they pick kids for the rounders team, they always pick the hemi kid last. And we have huge levels of suicide in our hemi kids when they get to sort of mid-30s, early 40s. And so we thought, let's look at where their self-esteem gets damaged. What's actually breaking their self-esteem so much that they lose faith in themselves and take their own lives? And a big part of it was their schooling. So we built a little school, Stepping Stones, for children with hemiplegia. We opened it with just 4 children, a little tiny school. I mean, it's massive expansion now. It's got 8 children, so it's grown beyond our wildest dreams, But it'll never be any bigger. And it's a school that's not like those factory schools that you see all around the world with children racked up, cells and bells and all the mad assumptions. You'll remember factory life in Victoria wasn't so long ago. It was an unremitting thing, and people got their joy from disrupting the life. A lot of your TV comics, a lot of your heroes of TV comedy back in the 80s and 70s were people who disrupted the systems that they were in. Over here it was people like Tony Hancock. In America it was Phil Silvers, Sergeant Bilko, and so on. They were the people that broke the systems. So we thought, why don't we build a system that is not a factory school? Why don't we build a system that doesn't, ring a bell and think that 1,000 children might be simultaneously hungry? Why don't we build a school where, you put children in a room because they want to be there learning rather than because they happen to be January birthdays? And that's what we did. We built a school that was full of play and engagement, and we've started pairing it up with other little tiny schools around the world. And you won't be surprised to hear that the engagement we've got from the children is stellar, is absolutely stellar. And I think that's what playfulness in learning offers us. It doesn't just offer us a little bit more engagement. It offers us a massive amount of engagement. And we start to realise how many of our children were coasting, how many of them were just doing what they thought they needed to do. And the minute that playful component starts to be really significant, you see that stellar performance. I'm building schools in the Caribbean at the moment, which is really exciting. It's great work. Listen, it's cold and raining here in London, and in the Caribbean it's not. So this is work I love to do. And what we've done out there is to transform the whole education system of one nation. And children's performance is best part of doubling over 4 years. Doubling, massive, massive, massive gains. I think if we were to reflect on that, I think the model of learning that we had before, back in the last millennium, was a model of met before learning. It was a world where children would sit down for their exam paper, and they'd turn over the paper, and they'd think, I really hope there's no surprises here. And their teachers would be outside the room thinking, I hope I've prepared them for everything. And yet we know that the world that we're going into, the world we live in, is a world that's full of surprises. It's a world that's full of volcanic ash clouds. It's full of unexpected deep sea oil spillage. It's full of economic collapse. It's full of terrorists, that surprise us all by being prepared to die with their bombs rather than just leaving their bombs. It's full of surprise. And you'll know what happens when those big surprises come along. We're paralysed globally for about a week. When the oil started flowing in the Gulf from the BP oil rig out there, people kept saying, what are you doing about it? And the BP folk, for a week, just kept saying, the oil shouldn't have spilt. The valve shouldn't have failed. They were incapable of thinking a solution because they were still in denial for the surprise that had faced them. Now, somehow, we've got to move from that world of met before learning to a world that surprises children and challenges them and delights them. I was humbled to follow Paul just now. I've been doing a lot of work over here with our with our Olympic sports folk. You know, we have the Olympics literally right here in London in a couple of years. And I'm a great sailor. One of the things that we're good at as a nation is sailing. Actually, we're good at all the sports where you sit down. This is our great strength. You know, we stand up and walk around, we're rubbish. But as long as you've got a seat, we're really good, you know. Atlanta Olympics was we did pretty badly. We turned up and our sailors were ready for the weather that we were expecting, and they were drilled to know if the wind shifts to there. My response is, you know, if then was at the heart of their training. But when we got there were thunderstorms, it was appalling weather, and as so often happens, those of you who are sailors will know this, you know, the locals say, the weather's not like this here normally, you know, it's all a big surprise. So what we focused on after that was, of course, our sailors have got to be good at sailing, but above all else, they've got to be good at coping with the unexpected. They've got to be good at being surprised, really, by the new learning circumstances that face them. When Shirley Robertson was racing out in the Sydney Olympics, she led the event right through to the last race. On the last race, the Dutch girl overtook her, so she'd gone from being the series leader to now suddenly, with one race to go, you know, she wasn't in the lead. And our coach came over and said, look, it's a whole new regatta. You know, that regatta's passed, you've hit your targets, you're on the rostrum, you've won a medal. Now we've got a new regatta, it's one race. If you win that, you get a gold medal. It's a new thing, go out and do it. And she went straight out and won the medal and did all right. And when the sailors went out to Qingdao for the Beijing Olympics, they all went out there, I think most of the world went out there expecting it to be a no-wind regatta. You know, there'd never been any wind in Qingdao for goodness knows, for the 10 years that we had data for coming up to the regatta. But on the day, of course, the dear old Chinese cleared the smog, and as soon as the smog went, the land heated up with the sunlight, you got thermal breezes, one of the windiest sailing regattas we've seen in the last 30 years. You know, there was a great quote from one of the American sailors who said, you know, we were expecting the unexpected, but we never expected this. What's really interesting about play is that it surprises you constantly. It challenges you constantly. It throws new thoughts at you. And we did a project here in London, big European project, where we were working with 4-year-old children. And the challenge was whether we could get the children to reflect on their learning. Could 4-year-olds do meta-level reflection in their learning? And with the children, we built these little robots that were their design, and we made them. Took us nearly 2 years of the project. It was really exciting. And in the end, we had these little robots that scampered around the floor in a very playful way and were a huge amount of fun to play with. And the children played with them, and they learned about learning, if you understand it, from playing with them. As part of the experiment, I took a sackload of these toys into a pub in London, and we're on the edge of the city of London here, you know, the big banking centre. I took them into a pub in London on a Friday evening, emptied them out on the floor, turned them all on. These toys were, you know, rushing around the floor. They're like little aliens, you know. And within 20 minutes, the bankers in there with their striped shirts and their sleeves rolled up and their braces were down on their knees playing with the toys and laughing with the surprise of what faced them. You know, the great thing about play in learning is it is joyful. It surprises you. It challenges you. It re-engages you. I've just come from a conference where we were talking about the future of broadcasting, and a big part of the future of broadcasting, very appropriate, following on from Paul's comments about where we are in Britain with broadcasting. A big part of that future, of course, is live. You know, live events have suddenly become hugely important, contests, but learning's become really important too. Our television's full of people learning to dance, learning to cook, and we need to learn to cook. Well, our food is appalling, as you well know. There are no English restaurants anywhere in the world. You know, it just doesn't happen. But the future of our broadcasting is also a future of play. And Channel 4 over here, for example, made a programme about 1066. We're currently obsessed with with early history on our television out here. The programme ran once, but the game 1066 that ran alongside it kept children's interest for 18 months. So, you know, how do you keep the interest of children, how do you keep the interest of adults in a single programme? How do you keep the advertisers at the front of people's minds and keep the money flowing into television? It turns out to be play, and it turns out to be games. If you search 1066 on Google now, you won't go to the Bay of Tapestry, you won't go to history, you'll go straight to that game site where children are still playing the game and adults are still playing the game, that's helping them to learn about history. I did a project over here where we took the world's leading business schools, INSEAD, the Judge Institute, the London Business School, MIT, and they were struggling to know what might we do in business learning to engage the board members of our biggest companies. If you're on the board of a blue chip company, on the board of BP even, what learning do you want? You don't want to do an MBA, you're well past that. And the program I put together for them was a program of playfulness. We ended up, unbelievably really, we ended up people swimming around in Lake Annecy over there in Switzerland, with shark fins on their back and doing all sorts of quite amazing stuff, most of which we'd stolen from the primary curriculum, And when those guys went back into their corporations, the first thing they did was to set up a Skunk Works project with the youngest people in the company. They went straight down to the youngest people that they could find in the company, and they said, let's do a project together, we'll do it behind closed doors, it'll be secret, we're going to have... And I said to them afterwards, I understand why you did that, but why did you go to the youngest guys? And they said, these are the people who got the fun left in them. And I think that's really important. So somewhere in this, our school systems are extinguishing the fun and joy of playfulness. Our corporate systems are extinguishing the fun and joy of play. And my absolute certainty is, if our system is going to be able to cope with the unexpected futures that are being thrown at us, we've absolutely got to put play right back at the heart of learning. One last thing, how am I doing for time? Am I good for time?
Absolutely fine, Stephen. A couple of minutes would be great.
That's perfect. We have a huge computer show here in London every January, and it's the biggest show in the world. 75% of the world's population were represented there by their education ministers, so quite apart from the guests, it's become a kind of Davos of learning, really. And I had a stand there last year on playful learning. And so many of the people that are running the show, hard-nosed, serious marketing and sales folk, came up to me and said, we're interested in this, what's this all about? And so I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll run a session after the show's closed, that a few of you want to come, and we'll ask the kids to stay on and do some stuff with you. And everybody said, that's never going to happen. They've all got meetings to go to, they've got deals to sign, they've got hotels to go back to, they've got affairs to enjoy, goodness knows what. They've got things to do. They won't come. And half an hour after the show closed, you could not move for the number of people that were crammed around that stand of playful learning. People crave and wish for playfulness. My last example, over in Dublin, the Irish government came to me and said, look, Stephen, we haven't got enough technologists, we haven't got enough programmers, we haven't got enough engineers. What might we do to get our population back into engineering and programming? And we set up this wonderful Festival of Light, where I challenged Dublin I said to communities, to companies, to families, I said, build something that controls light and will install them all for a week. And for a week in Dublin, the whole of Dublin lit up with the most mad stuff. We had children projecting games onto the walls of buildings, and we had Volkswagens driving around with sort of pulsing LED lights on them. The whole of Dublin lit up. It was like an art installation. But I'll tell you what, it was the most playful, the most engaging, and the most seductive thing. And you know what? No surprise. 2 years on, engineering and programming have become the coolest thing in Ireland. And boy, are they going to need that, because they're just one letter and 6 months from being Iceland at the moment. So look, all I'm suggesting really here is that play really matters in our lives. And I'm going to stop right there and just take you back to that little kid in his bed with his uniform on and his backpack on. And his dad said to him in the morning, why did you get ready so early? And he said, I couldn't wait to try new things. That absolutely has got to be all our lives. Thank you very much.
Stephen Heppell. Thank you, Stephen. Can I ask for the house lights just to come up a bit, and everyone wave to Stephen at that camera above the screen. Can you see us, Stephen?
I can really well. It's good to see you all.
Good.
I've always wanted to come into that very building, and this isn't quite as good as coming to listen to a concert, but it's nice to see it. I'm over in Melbourne later in the year, so I'll make a point of coming in and actually seeing the building. It's gorgeous, and interesting from the outside. It looks lovely inside too.
Fantastic. Please stay there because we want you involved in this Q&A for the last 15 minutes of the day. But fantastic technology with Cisco there. And speaking of technology, I don't know you know, Stephen, but here in Australia, we've got iPad covers that are at an angle, so you don't use your iPhone.
Yeah, I'd prop it mine up with the iPhone because the fluorescent lights in the room just come at a kind of curious angle to me here. So I tried mine with a little prop on the back, but it wasn't the right angle. So I just needed something that was better, so I improvised. And I'd also got this rather useful wooden wedge here, but that turned out to be no good at all.